A rest stop might seem like a place of solace on your journeys, somewhere to replenish, refuel, and energize, maybe even just take a break. However, there are some seriously shady people who reside here, so be careful. For now though, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. A long time ago, my job had an office near the Canadian border in Washington State. I often had to travel over there to help out and help train staff. Being a guy in my late 20s, single, and liked to get away for a few days, I was always up to making extra cash by volunteering to go wherever they needed me. I usually would fly up there, but some occasions when I needed to bring equipment or materials, I would drive. This one particular time was about 17 years ago. We had brought a bunch of equipment, wholesale, and needed to deliver this and some other odds and ends up to our office in Washington State. Of course, everyone knew I would volunteer to drive. I was told to drive a box truck up there and leave it and fly back. Prior to this, I would drive a company car or SUV. But no worries, the box truck wasn't that big, and probably the same size as one of those U-Haul rental trucks. I always preferred to start my driving journey towards the end of the day, mostly because I am one of those people who likes night driving. For the majority of my journey, it was uneventful. I only stopped at a gas station and the occasional rest stop to take care of nature's call. At some point, near the California-Oregon border, is when things started to get bad. It was approximately 1 a.m. I had stopped at a rest area, probably the last one on the California side. On the far distance, I do remember seeing some truckers parked, but basically the rest of the parking lot was empty. Now at this point, I wasn't thinking anything creepy or out of the normal. I just get out of my truck and go into the restroom to take care of business. I wash up a bit and take my sweet time stretching my legs and walk over to my truck. I notice a vehicle parked next to mine. It was literally like this whole parking lot, and this person pulls up next to me? Oh well, I jump in my truck and continue on my journey. About 10 to 20 miles down the freeway, my truck starts acting funny. Some of the interior lights begin flickering. I don't really think anything of it, and a little while later all of the lights in the vehicles go out. Interior lights, running lights, headlight. It's 2 a.m. and I'm in some wooded area of Oregon. I can't even find a flashlight in the truck cabin. I get so angry, not sure if being scared to drive 60 miles an hour in the middle of what seemed like a scene out of Tales from the Dark Side. But I pound my fist on the dashboard and scream at the truck. Almost instantly, everything came back on. I felt like Fonzie. At the next upcoming rest stop, I decide to pull over again, and perhaps from adrenaline, I had to pee like never before. I jump out of the truck and went to the restroom, although this time I didn't take that long inside, and walked out. I remember I was contemplating staying here until dawn, or just trooper on. As I walk up to my truck, I see an older guy, kind of heavy set with grey hair. He's standing next to my truck. I didn't see his vehicle near mine, but just assumed he was stretching his legs. As I walk up, he starts a conversation about the weather or something. A very light snow was falling, but not the kind of stuff that stays on the ground. I wasn't really paying much attention to him, because my first impression was that he was just a lonely old guy who wanted to chit-chat. Then he said something that made my hair stick up. He's looking at my truck and says, "Are you having mechanical problems?" I stopped in my tracks and felt blood rush to my head and just said, "Nope, Just drive it and try and stay out of the cold. He then tells me that he doesn't live too far from here, and that I would be welcome to join him for a hot coffee if I needed to sleep on his sofa. That kind of gave me the creeps. But me thinking to myself, if I needed, I could take this guy out. I thought I'm younger and stronger and not afraid to defend myself. So I basically end the conversation with, well, I better get back on the road before the snow really starts to fall. As I'm driving away, I see that he is walking behind the restroom. So I think to myself, what the heck was that all about? My mind is racing. I'm retracing my last few stops. And how did this guy know I was having electrical problems with my truck? I suddenly think back to the stop in California and the car that was parked next to my truck. Could he have done something to my wiring while I was taking my sweet time? A few more miles down the road, no new issues with my electrical, but I decide that at the next gas station I will stop. I pull up to a gas station, and in Oregon, they don't let you pump your own gas, so I wait for the attendant, and then decide to go in and get a drink. I paid, and as I'm waiting for my fueling, I walk around my truck and look at signs of tampering, and up near the front fender of the truck, I see some smears, but I'm not really sure if it's from the road, snow, or what. I tell myself, okay, you're just freaking out. I jump back into my truck, and as I pull out the gas station, I have to make a turn around to get back to the side where the ramp is on. And as I'm turning and just about to exit the lot, I see a car parked in the corner and someone sitting inside. I think to myself, am I just freaking out? Seeing shadows in every corner? It's just a few hours before dawn. Maybe in the morning I will laugh at this, but am I being followed and set up? Did I interrupt that old guy when he came out the restroom so fast? Was he following me and waiting for the right time and place for whatever he had in mind? Perhaps wanting to get what was in the back of my truck. As I continue driving on, the snow starts to get a little bit more concerning. I didn't grow up in areas that snow, but I have had a little bit of experience driving in snow, but not enough to know when things get more hazardous. I look out my rear view side window and see a pair of headlights trailing behind me, which is odd because most drivers pass me up. This person is following me. I'm already going well under the speed limit, but I slow down a bit more. He is still not passing me. At some point, I'm getting closer to a larger city. It's still dark and the snow is still lightly falling. I decide to pull over again, and maybe the car will pass. I quickly exit the freeway, and in front of me is another gas station with a patrol car parked there. I immediately pull up next to the cops and get out. There is a lady officer there and I start making conversation with her about the snow and expected conditions. I'm thinking about telling her about the car behind me, but all of a sudden, I felt silly about it. What was I going to say? I think I'm being followed by an old man? She is kind of nice, and we're talking for a bit, and she asked me where I'm going and where I came from. She does suggest that I stop for the night, and starts to tell me about the dangers of driving sleepy. I take a look around the area and said yes, I will stop for the night. She tells me that if I go down the road a couple of blocks near the 7-Eleven, there's a motel. I look around and don't see the car anymore, and I decide that I will stop for the night and go to sleep. As I pull up to the motel, I decided to park the truck away from the room I got, and park the truck behind the motel so as not to be seen from the road. I go into my motel room as quickly as I could, lock the door, and honestly didn't get much rest. I watched TV and nodded off here and there, but would awake at every noise. My mind kept racing back to recalling the events from before the California border, to my conversation with the police. Maybe he saw me talking to the cops and decided to take off. Maybe he was waiting for me to pull over at another rest stop and complete his plan, whatever it was. Why would a stranger invite another stranger to his house in the middle of the dead of night at a rest stop? Why did he ask me if I was having problems with my truck? Finally, it's about 7 a.m. and I decided that enough was enough. I get up, check out, have a big breakfast and continue to my office without anything weird happening. But I always wondered about that night and why I was being followed. About 2 years ago, me and my family moved from New Jersey to Florida for a fresh start. Before I start my encounter, I want to iterate my mental state at the time because it contributes to how I acted at the time of this story. So the night of the move, my mother got a call from a close family friend. She had just become pregnant and had started to have complications and feared she lost the baby. My mother, being the awesome woman she is, went over to help and watched her young son and calm our friend down and told her to go to the hospital to be sure and get her checked out. She and her husband rushed to the hospital and luckily they hadn't lost the baby. But it wasn't until 1 a.m. until my mother got back, and I was still up waiting for her to return. So yes, we were dead tired the next day, and we had to pack everything up for the long trip to our new home in Florida, while my father, who had slept through the whole ordeal that night before, was not. Anyway, I'm driving with my mother while my father is in another car, and I'm not exactly happy about the move. So tired and upset, we continued with our trip. We've always driven from New Jersey to Florida for years, and never had any weird experiences on the road. I'm not sure about my parents, but they've never talked about anything creepy in my 22 years of being alive, and I've traveled with them. And trust me, they love to tell me stories, and I do too. So when this happened, I was wholly unprepared for it. It certainly didn't help what happened the night before either. So we stop at one of the many stops on our way to Florida, and I think we were in the Carolinas or something near there when we stopped. Now, if you've never traveled before by car, a rest stop is a place like a civic center area. These places are for travelers who need a minute to stretch or go to the bathroom, or a place where they can safely rest for the night in their cars. These places are usually well lit and have vending machines for anyone who needs a snack or drink. It was late, maybe about 9 at night, and we stopped to stretch our legs and go to the bathroom. I wanted a few snacks, so I asked my mother for some. She gave them to me, and I entered the nice little enclosed area that contained the machines. So I'm standing there alone, picking what I want, when this woman comes in. She's short, skinny older woman who's dressed nice with bleached blonde hair. When I glance at her and smile politely, she comes right up to me and holds out her hand for a shake, and introduces herself. Dumbfounded, I shake her hand back, and stupidly told her my name. After that, she launches into this tale of woe about how she lost her wedding ring, had a head wound, and that her car was out of gas, and that she needed some money and other things that I honestly can't remember. I'm just standing there listening and trying to figure out how to get out of this situation. Now you have to understand this was literally the first time anyone had ever approached me at one of these stops, mostly because I think I don't have the most friendly of faces for people to approach. Even though I'm a girl, I'm tall at around 5'6", taller than most girls, especially this woman, with broad shoulders, and I resemble my father, who doesn't have the most welcoming of faces either, an accent. But me? I'm a bleeding heart, and never want to be rude to people. But in this situation, I would have been if it hadn't been so out of the blue. When I'm in situations that are new to me, I tend to freeze up and can't think. I don't know how to act or what to do, as I'm not expecting it. As you can guess, I'm a big introvert and socially awkward, but I don't have a problem with telling people to go away. In this situation, I'm outright to panic, and I just want to get away from this weird woman. And I say weird because that head injury she mentioned, she didn't have one. Not even a single bruise. And she was talking so fast and non-stop, I couldn't even tell her no. I can't help her, or even try. For some reason, being polite was more important than getting the hell away from her. So I'm standing there exhausted to my bones, about to shove what little money I have at her so that she just goes away, when my mother walks in. My badass of a mother comes right in. I'm taller than her, by the way, and says that I can't and tells me to come with her. The woman takes a step back, and I realize just how close she was. I hadn't even noticed she was steadily coming closer as she was talking. She tells my mother how beautiful and nice I am, when really I look like a greasy mess, because I don't care about my appearance when I'm taking a road trip. My mother doesn't really respond, and she has me by the arm walking towards the bathroom, asking if I'm okay. That woman got the hell out of there, and goes in the opposite direction of where her car was. Looking back on it all, I thought it was just weird, and I was certainly weirded out by it all. But I just thought whatever. But after listening to YouTube and reading Reddit posts, I realized how lucky I was 2 years later that the situation hadn't escalated. I think the reason she approached me was because my money was folded, and it looked like I had a lot more on me, when in reality I only had $6 to $7. And because it was probably obvious to her how tired I was, and how much of an easy score she could have gotten in my tired, grumpy state, she went for it. So if anyone hears this, I hope you aren't planning on traveling alone. But if you are, be careful. Even of the people who look completely normal. You can never be too careful, especially at the people looking for an easy score. So strange woman who was lying through her teeth, wanting to get the $6 out my hands, please, let's never meet again. This past September, I had taken a road trip down to Myrtle Beach with the family. It was myself, my mother, my sister, her husband and their 2 kids. We had used my car and both my sister and husband's car to transport everything and all of us. We had rented a beach house for a little over a week and had a pretty great time. I was in the middle of a difficult point in my life and struggling with employment and being between jobs, and having just started 2 new jobs fresh, I was a little low on funds and worried about making my car payments and the like. So I opted to head home 2 days early with my car, so that I could try and get more work hours in. My family expressed being nervous as I planned to leave after dinner and drive through the night to get home. I consoled them that I would be okay, because I'd be up all night and head straight home and only stop for gas and food as needed. I'm an excellent driver, a tad impatient, so I tend to go until I absolutely have to stop and take a break. However, this would be a 12-hour trip, and I knew I would need breaks, so I made a point to stop at every rest stop to at least get out and stretch, so I stayed awake and didn't get too sore. Going through West Virginia, I'm sure you guys know how secluded their rest stops and visitor centers are, especially when you're heading north from the south going through the mountains. I stopped at a visitor center because they advertised having a fast food joint, and I really had to answer nature's call. This was sometime very late at night, between 1 and 3 a.m. Side note that sent shivers down my spine after what happened, I like to drive barefoot. So I pulled in, noticed the building with fast food was closed, and I drove around the lot and parked under a streetlight in front of the visitor center so that I could use the restroom. Leaning out of my car door, I took my time putting my shoes on and walking inside, having looked around and not seeing anything out of the ordinary. I checked my phone, grabbed my wallet before standing up to walk in, and made sure my car made the noise to signal the doors were locked. Walking towards the center, I saw a man in a white hoodie standing at the edge of the sidewalk, leading into the center. I didn't think much of it until I passed him, and got an off vibe. I glanced over at my shoulder, and he was watching me walk in. For some reason, I glanced to my left as I turned back to face forwards, and noted another man sitting at the benches that were on the other side of tall, thin bushes. Oh nope, I thought. I instantly went in, peed, and before I got out the bathroom I called my roommate. As dumb as it was, because he was a good 4 to 6 hours away, it just made me feel safer. I gave him a quick rundown of my situation and made him stay on the phone with me. I started to walk out, and couldn't see the man at the front of the sidewalk anymore. I glanced to my now right and saw both men standing next to a bench facing forwards. I saw a couple walking in to, presumably, use the restroom as well. I had an intense impulse to ask them to walk with me, but my paranoia kicked in because I knew something was wrong somewhere in my situation, and I didn't ask, thinking that they might know the men. Walking briskly to my car, I explained to my roommate that the men were by the benches, daring the smallest of peeks over my shoulder again. And I saw the man in the white hoodie walking towards me, and I told my roommate. Walking a few paces forwards, I looked back and saw his pace had quickened. At this point, I told my roommate that he was following me to my car, and I booked it. I thankfully had the key fob, got my key out, and ready to unlock my car, and practically threw myself in, not daring to glance back. I threw my car in reverse and gunned it backwards before going back into drive and sped off, and didn't even bother to put my seatbelt on until I was at the exit of the parking lot, and didn't look back once. I stopped at the next toll road and filed a report, and the workers called for state troopers to head over and check things out. I didn't stop shaking for hours, and refused to get out of my car until I was home. I horrified myself at the thought. If those guys had paid attention and made their move quicker, they could have incapacitated me at my car while I was facing the ground and putting my shoes on, and I could have had absolutely no defense. Please, be careful on the road. I was 18 years old, and on my way home to California on summer break, after my sophomore year of college. I had a 9-hour car ride ahead of me, and stocked up on energy drinks, soda, and snacks for the ride home. I left school late after dinner with friends, and planned on driving into the night. I'm making good time, and I'm around 3 or 4 hours from home, which was Yuba City at the time. I'm an hour outside Reno, and on a lonely stretch of road when it happened. I suddenly get the urge to pee, those energy drinks I chugged coming back to haunt me, and I kick myself in the ass for not stopping when I had gassed up 45 minutes before. I saw a sign that advertised a rest stop coming up, and so I drove the few miles to the sign, then pulled in. Parked in the parking lot was a ratchet-looking sedan, and on the other side of the lot, a Sprinter-type van. I quickly got out and hurriedly jogged to the restroom before I peed myself. I was flushing when I heard someone enter, and I froze. I'm in decent physical shape, and I work out quite often, but for a guy, I'm on the smaller side at only 5'7" and 160 pounds. So I'm bracing myself for some Michael Myers type stuff when I open the door and see an average Joe looking guy. He looks up, gives me a friendly smile, and then steps over to the urinal. I washed my hands and was getting ready to leave when he starts talking. His voice was gravelly and low, so I couldn't hear him the first time. "You like dogs, man?" he asked me as he washed his hands. He was wearing those coveralls that mechanics wear, and he had grease stains on it. My creeper meter started beeping. I shot him a friendly smile and said, "Yeah, man, dogs are cool," as I left. Well, that was the wrong thing to say, because he comes out the door almost at my heel. "I got a new puppy. Wanna see him? He's real cute." Now I'm freaking out. Keys are in one hand and my cell phone in the other. I called back in a shaky voice, "Nah, thanks. Gotta get going." I'm getting to my car when he grabs the door, trying to open it wider. This dude was strong, and he's a good few inches smaller than me. I start my car and put my phone to my ear, and what he said next caused me to almost crap my pants. "Time the cops are here. You'll already be finished." With that, I kicked at his stomach, and thank goodness it connected. He let go of the door and fell on his ass. I then locked the doors and screeched the hell out of that rest stop. I saw him scramble for his car, but I didn't stay around enough to watch, and I took off like a bat out of hell. I was a nervous wreck for the next 3 hours, thinking he was going to follow me home and finish me off. When I got home, I told my dad, who had stayed up to wait for me, about what happened, and he told me to not call the authorities. I made sure to take an entirely different route when I went back to school in the fall, and because of that, I've never stopped at another rest stop ever again. So dude, wherever you are, I don't want to see your puppy. Back in the late 90s, my best friend was getting married. As her maid of honor, it was my job to throw her a bachelorette party. Instead of the regular humdrum get liquored up and see naked men party, I decided to do something a little different. Not to mention, she was the only one who was 18 at the time, so there weren't many party options. The company my dad worked for at the time owned land that they had a ranch on, complete with cows, and out in the middle of nowhere. I had been there with my family on quite a few occasions, and I loved it out there. I decided that we should go out there, have a bonfire, maybe drink a little, and since we both loved it, we could fish in the lake that the mines had dug up. That was the plan anyway. I told Renee about my plan for her party, and she seemed to think that it was a fun idea, since we didn't truly want to hang out with a bunch of people anyway. She was going to bring her cousin April, and I was going to bring my niece Tony. We had spent the past 2 years hanging out all the time anyway, and had grown quite close. When I say niece, I know some of you will automatically think she was about 4 years old, but she was only 2 years younger than I. Since we all still lived with our parents, we had to come up with something better than, "Hey guys, we're gonna go hang out in the middle of nowhere and have a bonfire on a piece of property that may or may not be safe for 4 teenage girls." So we said we were going bowling. I was driving an old Chevy truck, and Renee was driving a Mustang, which, by that time, was already 8 years old. At about 6 p.m., Renee and April showed up at my house, and we loaded up my truck and got on the road. Tony riding with me, and Renee and April in her car. I'm still thankful that Renee chose to drive her car and follow me, instead of riding with me. We drove for about 45 minutes, slowly watching the town become nothing but trees and fields on both sides. A herd of cows, or an orange grove here and there. We lived in Florida, so everything was flat, and you could see for miles. The sun started disappearing, and finally it was completely dark. I got to the end of a very long highway, and I took a right. I couldn't remember the name of the dirt road I was supposed to turn on, but I knew I would recognize it when I saw it. And I did. That is when it gets weird. The minute I turned on the dirt road that led to the ranch, I saw smoke. Being February in Florida, I just thought it was dry dirt surrounding me. No such luck. The truck was smoking underneath the hood. I stopped and got out and popped the hood. Sure enough, there was a small fire. I can't tell you what started it, but I can tell you that it was burning. It may have been wires or hoses or just whatever. I'm not an under the hood kind of person. Renee and April pulled up behind me and came up to see what was wrong. The four of us were throwing dirt on the fire, and we finally got it put out, and Renee pulled her car in front of my truck to face it with the headlights on. We still couldn't really see anything, so we just stood there trying to figure out what to do. We finally decided to pile into Renee's car and find a gas station to get some water, because that's what you do when there's a fire. You look for water. We drove for a good 20 minutes before we saw the bright lights of a gas station. We pulled in, and we couldn't believe how bright this thing was. For being out in the middle of nowhere, it lit up like the 4th of July. We all walk in and head straight for the cooler and find water. All four of us grab a gallon of water and then find some grub for ourselves. We went to the counter, and there's a woman working there. I remember thinking how pretty she was. She had light blonde hair and clear, deep blue eyes. Man, she's too pretty to be working at night at a gas station in the middle of nowhere, I thought. When we put all 4 gallons of water on the counter, she asked what we needed with all the water. Renee told her, and she said, "Hang on a sec, my husband's a mechanic. I'll call him and see what he says." Convenient, huh? She pulled out a telephone from under the counter. It was an old rotary-style phone which seemed weird to me at the time. So she called him, and he said that as long as the fire was out, go ahead and fill it up with water, and he was sure it would start. Now as I'm saying this, I'm wondering how he was sure that it would start. We didn't even know what was under the hood that was on fire to be able to tell him, nor did he know how bad the fire was. He also said that if it didn't start, to come back to the store and have his wife call him, and he would meet us out to where we were and fix it. We thanked the cashier and left. When we got back in the car, we felt a little better and started talking. Renee said she loved the black and white checkered gas pump. She said they almost looked like cows. I asked what she was talking about. She said, the gas station, the one we were at. No, they were green. The whole place was green and white. April and Tony thought we were both crazy, as April had seen red and Tony had seen blue. We got really quiet again, and finally Tony asked what the woman looked like. I gave them my version, adding that she was some tall model. Renee had seen dark brown hair. Tony had seen dirty blonde, and said the girl was short. I can't remember what April said, but hers was also different. We argued, and just finally let it go. We got back to the truck, added water until it was overflowing, got inside, and it started right up, with no hesitation at all. We were all so happy because now, as long as we got home without anything terrible happening, none of our parents would ever know what had happened. As for the truck, I thought I'd just tell my dad that there was a fire at the bowling alley, but I was able to limp the truck home. On the way home, there was a car behind me the entire time, so of course I thought it was Renee and April. This was before everyone had cell phones, so we weren't calling to make sure. Finally we get home, and pull into my yard and park the truck. Tony and I had been pretty quiet on the way home, partially because we were trying to make sense of what happened at the gas station, and partially because we were praying the truck would get us home. I expected Renee to pull in right behind me, but she didn't. Tony and I decided she must have stopped for gas, so we waited a little while for her to arrive. Finally, after 20 minutes, she pulled up, and she was angry. "Why are you so mad?" I asked her. "Because you left us and we got lost," she yelled. "But you weren't behind us the entire time?" I yelled back now, also annoyed. "Renee, when we pulled off the dirt road, you were behind us. There was no other traffic out there. You turned with us back onto the highway. I saw you. I was literally a straight shot from there. How could you have gotten lost?" "I don't know. I followed you off the dirt road and I turned left when you did, and then I saw you turn onto another road." "I never turned onto another road until I turned onto this street," I said. She just looked at me like I was crazy, and we decided to tell my parents we were back and that we were going to Denny's. We were hungry, and we thought that maybe we could find a booth and talk this out over there. When we got to Denny's, we ordered some food and started talking. "Where did you end up when you saw us turn off the highway?" asked Tony. "I don't know where it was," said Renee in her shaky voice. "We ended up at this store/bar thing, and since it was the only thing we had seen for miles, we had to go in and ask for directions." Renee and April had gone into the store, practically hanging onto each other. They said that when they walked in, everyone turned to stare. The place got dead quiet, and they both got more scared than they had ever been. Renee said that she went up to a counter and asked the woman behind it how to get back to our town. Renee and April said the woman laughed and said that she was a long way from home. They both said her laugh and the general atmosphere of the place made them feel like this was somewhere they should have never been, and they should have never have known about. Just not a good vibe altogether. However, she told them how to get back, and they pretty much ran into the car as fast as they could and left. The four of us sat in the back of the booth for a few hours, going over what happened that night. How we couldn't agree on what the woman looked like. How we couldn't agree on what the store looked like. How we couldn't even agree on the size of the inside of the store or how it was set up. We were retracing our steps from the moment we walked in. Okay, there was a display of chips on the right as you walk in, a set of coolers on the side, and the back wall. The counter was on the left, and it was kind of on a pedestal, so the cashier stood way taller than the rest of us. Needless to say, nobody agreed with that. Everyone had their own version of what the store looked like. Now I know that we all walked into the store. I know that we all spoke to that woman, and our stories should not have differed so dramatically. Finally, we decided to call it a night and headed home. The next morning I went out to check the damage on the truck. I popped the hood with the other 3 girls standing right next to me, and since we had just ended up staying the night together, we were in shock. The truck looked fine, the wires looked fine, there was nothing charred or even black, no holes in the hose, nothing. It looked like there had never been a fire at all. Fast forward 6 years later, Renee and I were talking about the events of the day, and just on a whim we decided to drive out there and have a look. After I showed her the gate that led to the ranch, she said, "Let's go find the gas station again." I agreed, and we drove up and down that road for so long. No matter how far we drove, we couldn't find anywhere a gas station, or where it could have been. There was nothing. It was like it never existed. The only store I ever remember being out there was a small grocery store that I always thought looked like a log cabin. My family would go to this store when we were at the ranch if something came up and we needed food or girly supplies. I knew right there where the store was, but it was not the only one we had gone to that night. I asked Renee if she could remember the name of the store, and she said it was Pioneer Gas. I came home that day and googled it, and finally found a company called Pioneer Gas that was based in Alaska, nowhere near Florida, and asked my dad, brother, and both of my sisters if they remember any other stores aside from the log cabin grocery store, and they all said no. Tony passed away in 2007, and April got into Jesus so much that she had no contact with anyone that's not a part of her church right now. So it's just me and Renee who truly know what happened that night. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's stories. If you did, don't forget to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. It really does help me out a lot and it goes a long way. Why not share your story with me if you have one, by posting it to Reddit or sending it to my email. The information can be found in the description. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.